We often hear people wishing us a long, happy, and healthy life. But what if the length isn't what matters most? What if instead it's the breadth, depth, and purpose of each day that matters most? Welcome to the Live the Width of Your Life podcast. My name is Aneta Ardelian Kuzma, and join me weekly as I interview guests who made changes in their own lives to live more fully with intention, gratitude, and joy. Be prepared to be inspired by their stories of how they shifted their mindset, took courageous action, and designed the life that they always wanted to live. Today's guest is Jim Marous. Jim is consistently rated as one of the top 5 most influential people in banking and one of the most sought-after keynote speakers for industry and corporate events. Known for his understanding of the disruption in the banking industry, Marous is the co-publisher of the financial brand and owner and publisher of the Digital Banking Report. He also hosts his podcast, Banking Transformed. Jim speaks on innovation, digital transformation, customer experience, marketing strategies, channel distribution, payments, and change management. He's been featured on CNBC, CNN, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, New York Times, The Financial Times, The Economist, The American Banker, FinTech Finance, and Accenture, and he's spoken to audiences worldwide. Jim has also advised the White House on banking policy and is a contributor for Forbes and the Breaking Banks radio show. Welcome to the Live the Width of Your Life podcast. I'm so excited. This is my very first episode, and my guest is Jim Marous. Thank you, Jim, so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be the first guest and to start this new endeavor of yours off hopefully well.
Oh my gosh. Well, of course, so thrilled. And I do want the audience to know that when I sent an email out to my community saying, hey, guess what? I want to launch this podcast. And I sent a survey out. You were the very first person who responded and you said, let me know how I can help. And I just want to thank you for that because you, I know, mentor me and you mentor so many people. And that means the world to me. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So I want to congratulate you also. You were just named one of the top 5 most influential people in banking and fintechs. Is it like for the 10th year in a row?
It's been a long time. And I always couch it to say, it's not like I'm influential as much as I'm an influencer on social media. And part of that comes because I've been in the same career or the same industry from the beginning of time. Since I came out of college and joined National City Bank, and I've been in the same industry my whole life. But also, the stars have aligned at certain times. When I got into the business of content creation, it was when I was 55, and I said, you know what, I want to make it so so I don't become irrelevant in any way. So I said, maybe there's a way to learn, disperse the information, and help at that time I was in sales. But just as importantly, it's interesting because the whole dynamic of what we all do is trying to share and have dialogue, and that makes life more fulfilling. And as a whole, it's exciting. And if you're not afraid of failure, it kind of opens up a whole realm of possibility.
Oh my gosh, that is the truth. And fear does hold so many of us back, keeps us stuck for way too long. So going back to your background, I know you said you started in banking, and at one point you said, I don't want to be irrelevant anymore. So how did you decide what you were going to do next? Did you have it all figured out, or did you just have the next step figured out?
No, it's interesting because at the time when I made the decision to do something in addition to what I was already doing. At the time, I was in the sales role at a marketing services firm that served the banking industry. And I said, well, maybe there's a way. I have already in my career done well in sales, but usually by being an invaluable resource to my clients. So if I was able to continually know as much or more than my clients in certain realm, not in the realm that they did, but in the broader sense, and I was able to bring that to the table, it made it so they realized right off the bat that I may not be the smartest person at the table, but I'm an asset. And that was gratifying to me, obviously, but it also worked well for the clients. So at the time, I said, you know what, I got to take this to the next level because I, as most of us remember, that person that comes into the office that really is saying the exact same thing they said 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years
Mhm.
ago. And I had been in the industry for a long time. And I said, how can I mix this up a little bit? I said, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start a blog. And this was back in, geez, I think it was 2008, 2007, sometime around then. And blogs were just starting. So I said, I'll set up a blog. I'll use WordPress and start something that basically takes research that I read. I give my spin on it. I link it to the research so that people can access it. But I use that as a gateway to opening the doors of new and existing clients. And basically, I would say, I pick up the phone or get on email and say, hey, you know what? Have you seen my latest article? And they go, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I have this blog, and I'm writing articles about research, but I think you'd really be interested in this research. Tell you what, you can take a read of what I've said, but how about if I bring in this research to you? Well, the research was free access anyway, so it's not like I was bringing anything that they couldn't find. But the reality was, it was at the time when people really were overwhelmed with just a lot of stuff. I remember how I used to read our trade publication, The American Banker. People weren't doing that anymore. There was just information overload. So what I did,
Mhm.
I pared down what I thought was important. I obviously related well to the people that related well to what I liked. And so you kind of predefine your own segment on what you're good at, and it became a business. I took a summer off about a year after I started it to follow my son's sports endeavors, and he was at showcases and things. And I took a summer off, and when I started writing again, I had people connect with me and say, "Where were you? We didn't know if you died, or whatever else. We were relying on that." And for the next year, I paid attention and said, how many people are really paying attention here? And I had over 1 million readers of articles during that time. Not a million
Wow.
individual people, but 1 million downloads of my articles. I'm going like, guys, I think it's about time I start to figure out a way to monetize this. It just
Mhm.
so happened I got in a partnership with a gentleman that had a much bigger publication, and I became a writer for him. But again, I was simply doing what worked down the path naturally. And in
Mhm.
2007, 2008, for those who don't remember, that was also the beginning of social media with LinkedIn and Twitter. I realized that those may be great conduits to announce I have something else that became, that hit the airwaves or the newswaves. So all these things kind of aligned in a neat way that made it so I became a content producer. I became relevant in certainly in the marketing and the financial services realm. And as a result, that's getting back to your very first question about being an influencer. I was an influencer on social media more than being influential, which is a whole lot more because I don't build things. I write things. I do research, but
Mhm.
basically my career over the last 12, 13 years has all been about some form of learning and dispersion of content creation.
Mhm. Well, I think that's a wonderful way to simplify it, but it's amazing to actually see looking back, trying to
Oh gosh,
connect the
yes.
dots.
Oh, definitely.
Because one of the things that I noticed about you, and something that you and I talked about early on, is just consistency. Creating this brand, knowing what your brand is, posting consistently so people know where to find you. So tell me a little bit of how your brand evolved and the things that you did
Great.
then and what you're doing now.
Great question, because my brand initially was writing articles for a company called The Financial Brand. I'm the co-publisher, and it was basically just two of us writing at the time. There's now 7 or 8 writers as well as contributors. But what was interesting is I realized that, well, maybe there's more I can do here because it wasn't enough financially for me just to do what I was doing there. So I bought a report business. And the report business, in doing research in the industry using our database of subscribers, I had a database I could ask questions of, build reports, and then use that for content. So every time I did something, I was trying to figure out how can they feed each other. And it
Mm.
ended up where my articles helped to feed my report business helped to feed my content, both of which got exposure for me, which then became the foundation upon which I started a speaking business. And in 2019, which is the last normal year that we know of,
Hmm.
I did 20, I think 25, 27 international speaking engagements, anywhere from 50 people to 5,000 people. I did them
Wow.
domestically as well on the same subject matter. So back to what you were talking about with consistency, I also realized
Hmm.
that if you're going to write, set a cadence and live to that cadence. Because no matter how popular you are, no matter how much somebody wants to hear about you, there's so much going on that you've got to make it part of their daily habit. Otherwise,
Hmm.
they're not going to look for you because they're going to go, when I think of Jim, I'll search for his name, see what he's written. I'll maybe
Hmm.
read one or two articles. If they know I'm going to publish every Monday, then they're there on Monday to see what did Jim post now. If I come out with reports on a consistent basis, and now the most recent area of content is my webinars and my podcast, if they know when it's going to happen, that helps increase your exposure. And then if you continually are looking at how can I give back? So when I'm writing research often with the assets of other companies, let's say an Accenture, McKinsey, something like that. I make sure to give them credit, give them links. And many of these companies, IBM and others, have said, we get more people to read our content based on your link than we do from our own exposure to it in the social media realm. And that's probably because it's sometimes very hard to find on many of these platforms.
Yeah.
Plus, some people may say, I can't go to 25, 30 organizations, see what they've written. That's what my
Hmm.
job is. And then pick the best of the best, at least ones that align with what I think, and build it from there.
Wow, that is so amazing. So, what would you say to someone who may be in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, even, who finds themselves stuck or maybe a little bit, like they're not growing and they're considering doing something different, but maybe they're worried or they don't think they can make money doing something that they really enjoy? What advice would you give them?
It doesn't matter if it's content. It doesn't matter if you have a hobby. The
Yeah.
internet is a great equalizer right now. The internet allows you to not only expose yourself and get out there with very little risk, no money at all has to be done to get exposed in the marketplace, but then to build a network of people that are of like mind. So let's say I collect little the little metal cars. There's a whole universe of people that also collect the same thing. If you find the leaders in that realm, you're going to find other people through them that will connect you to other people. And if you're contributing to the conversation, what's neat is they let you in and they help promote you. Human
Mhm.
nature is that we all want to help each other. It's not a competitive scenario. What's neat is I found out very early that, I can't worry about who else may be getting a piece of the pie. What
Right.
my goal is to increase the size of the pie. So whatever
Mhm.
piece I get is going to be acceptable. And so I think one of the things you really have to do is, number one, realize the risk level is so low. It's the thought of failure that really throws us
Yeah.
off. It's not the failure itself. I mean, I'm sure in your endeavors in the last few years, you've had
Yeah.
stumbles, you've had disappointments, but every one of them has been a learning experience. Now, some people may have to run parallel paths at the same time. They may have to hold on to what they have and
Right.
at night do something different. The
Mhm.
one thing I have absolutely no patience for are people that will continually say, I hate what I'm doing, or
Right.
I wish I was doing something else. The
Mhm.
world today makes it so that anybody can do anything at a level. Gary Vaynerchuk, who I read and follow quite a bit, says,
Yeah.
if you want to do something as simple as get something on eBay that's
Mhm.
underpriced and then resell it at a
Yeah.
markup, you can make a living doing that. You just have to get really efficient. And
Mhm.
during that process, you're learning things. I learned a lot early in my writing career, early in my report career, and then it transformed into my webinar, and my speaking, and my podcast career. But you still have to learn. You have to be aware. And as you know, and how we came in contact is, you also have to be willing and desirous of sharing with others what you learn. Because what ends up happening is people share back with you. Now, you can't do it with a contingency. You can't share going, I'm only going to share if you share back.
Right.
But good things happen to people that help others. And
That's
if you
right.
go with that mantra, if you believe that, and don't feel upset when it doesn't work out quite that way, you're going to do okay. But the pandemic gave us an amazing opportunity to expand the breadth. Using
Hmm.
your podcast, expand the breadth of what you can do. And
That's right.
I liken it to going to the doctor. The doctor will tell you, you need to change your diet, you need to change your exercise habits to be healthier. And you may keep on it for about a month. But it's that third year that you go and he goes, you know what? We got a problem here. You haven't exactly been following my regimen, and we see something here that's not good. It's amazing how pain makes you switch immediately. People did this during the pandemic. Some people got out of the workforce. Some are coming
Yep.
back in. Some started
Hmm.
new businesses. I think what we have to realize is that everything that looks like a threat, if you have the right attitude, it actually is a great opportunity out there. I mean, the economy going down right now. There's never been a better time to start a new business because other people are getting out of business or are being shut down because they're not evolving. They don't have the challenger mindset. So at the end of the day, if you
That's
have the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to work harder at what I do. My son was in sports, and he always said the reason why he practiced twice as hard in the summertime than during the season was because he realized his competitors weren't all practicing. And so he had a way to move up the ranks of what his competitive situation was because he was doing something other than what everybody else was doing. It's easy to be like everybody else. It's when you can stand out and do things a little differently and look for those avenues. And I'll get back to the social media side. Reach out to those that are the foremost leaders in what you want to do and engage with them. Maybe it's asking them to be interviewed. Maybe it's
yeah.
simply saying, I'm just starting this field. Can I spend 5 minutes on the phone with you? They are more than willing to help because they realize, it's not a competitive situation. We all want to help each other. And I think that's what you have to being told no 10 times to get one yes is great. And what's interesting is over time, if you do well, you're going to have 10 people coming to you and you're only going to be able to say yes to one. That's a whole
Yeah.
flip of the coin there.
So true. I wanted to talk about a couple of things that you just mentioned. One is the pandemic. So I know that
Yeah.
you were traveling and you were doing
Yep.
speaking. And I remember when you and I talked during the pandemic and you said, I'm going to start a podcast. You started to shift. You saw that something was changing. We weren't sure when we were getting out. There are obviously podcasts out here, but there isn't one exactly like yours. And your
Yep.
podcast is the number one podcast in banking. So, talk a little
Yeah.
bit about when you got the idea. Were you thinking about doing it for a bit? And then what have you learned during your podcast journey?
It's interesting. To your point, when my speaking business, which at the time was about a third to half of my revenue, was going to
Hmm.
shut down, and you could see it happening. I was
Right.
traveling in January of 2020, going, this does not look good. If we get shut down as
Yeah.
far as travel, all the events I go to and speak at, and
Hmm.
all the people that send salespeople to other companies to sell and to events to sell, that's all going to be shut down. What can come from that? And I decided to not just take my report business, but decided to build white papers that could be sponsored by organizations that sold to the banking industry. So I would write a shorter version of what I would do in a report business that could get companies' names out there at a time when salespeople were working from home or not traveling at all. In
Hmm.
addition to your point, I said, maybe I can start a podcast to interview people, which is my way of gathering more insight from people across the world, but connections I had across the world. I started, you know, good old email. I can get to the Middle East, I can get to the Far East, I
Yeah.
can get to Europe and connect with these people. I think people would still be interested in hearing from these people. At the
Hmm.
same time, there's a sponsored element of my podcast where companies can sponsor me to interview their people about what they do. Now, the only qualification is you're not allowed to sell on the podcast. Has
Hmm.
to be for the benefit of the audience, my audience, to be able to learn more about what's going on in the industry. And oh, by the way, just by thinking a little bit, you say, well, this must be spot. They must do this. This company must do this.
Right.
And it worked out famously. It was much
Mm.
more than I ever expected. But it was interesting because, again, we were doing the same thing we were doing before, but this was new channels. Webinars turned into more like podcasts, where it's more like what you and I are doing now,
Yeah,
rather than a PowerPoint presentation.
that's right.
So what we really realized was there's ways to pivot. It's a word that we used quite a bit during the pandemic. And at a time that Zoom, I mean, we never knew what Zoom was before March of 2020. Well, we became more open to trying to see new things. And you know what? You even have to think out of the box once you get something established. Keep that challenger mindset. It was 1 year ago that I started saying, I'm going to start recording these video and audio.
Mhm.
Prior to that, for the first 2.5 years, 2.25 years, it was only audio. I said, we have a video platform here. Why don't we also record it this way and start a YouTube channel? Well,
Mhm.
things don't always work the way you think they're going to. So we started 95 episodes ago recording on video. I just introduced the YouTube channel, I think it was 4 weeks ago. Now, what was the delay? Me. I had all this content and I
Yeah.
didn't really put it into the platform yet. And now that is going to provide at some point another sponsorship opportunity. But it was also the way I started the podcast initially, which was I never looked for any sponsors of podcast. I never looked for anything other than distributing content, building an audience, building a reputation, and then saying, maybe somebody else wants to participate in what I'm doing. So I invested with a producer, put a year under my belt before we even asked for anybody to help sponsor it or contribute anything. Same thing's going on with the YouTube channel. It's now, mind you, not everybody has that ability to do that, but it's
Mhm.
always better to build your reputation before you try to
Yeah.
sell your reputation. We're
Mhm.
not all the fashion icons that can go out there and put a TikTok video up and get money for it automatically. I we have to. I have, as I say, I have a face for writing, not for podcasting. But again, it's one of those things that if you do it with your genuine enthusiasm, it's going to always work better.
Oh my gosh, I agree. And thank you for giving me the tip to start off doing the video and the audio. It's one of the first things you told me to do. And I appreciate that you took your learnings and you shared it with me early on.
Well, yeah,
So,
YouTube is the fastest growing
yeah,
search engine and the fastest growing content listening and watching platform. So there are many people that pick YouTube up, put it on their phone, put the earbuds in, and listen to what you think they're watching. It's just
yeah.
another channel. And you can't, again, what's also neat about the podcast from my perspective is I also love to write. So my
Mhm.
podcast interviews become content, and then turn
Mhm.
into writing that helps me fulfill my obligation on the financial brand and on my reports.
So smart. I love how it's all integrated. And the
Try.
other thing that's integrated is I love to follow you, not just on LinkedIn, but also on Instagram. And what I appreciate so much is that you share all of you. I see
Yeah.
photos and posts about your family, about sporting events, about concerts that you go through, but also you're on this wellness journey. And I love seeing you talk about riding your bike, you do Velasano, your favorite smoothies wherever you are visiting. I see that you get
Yep.
some good
Yep.
smoothies. So tell me about this wellness journey that you're on and how long have you been on it? Because it seems like it's something that is really important to you.
Well, it is. I referenced the doctor analogy on my transformation. And the reality is, I had a saying that I would use when I was presenting, which was embrace change, take risks, and disrupt yourself. And all of a sudden, I realized that I wasn't the best version of myself, and I'm not sure if any of us ever get there completely. But I realized that it all is part of this whole journey. I can't go internationally and speak and get in planes and get off of planes and spend 4 days in Budapest or in Paris or in Utah, any place else, if I'm not healthy. And I had some issues I had to deal with, and the doctor made it very clear I better deal with them. And I decided in January of, I think it was 2018, it might have been, maybe it's probably 19, that I was going to do the double whammy. I was going to first going to lose weight. I was going to focus on losing weight. I joined the Noom platform, which is the digital diet program, kind of like Weight Watchers, but for digital mobile phone junkies, and got on that platform and lost around 25 pounds. And I said, well, having lost that, I now can do some better exercising. So I joined a local fitness studio, and one that really required commitment. That if you signed up and didn't go, you got charged, and it was it was my kind of platform. Everybody's got something different they like, but putting those things together, I lost over 50 pounds. I've gained a little bit since then, not a ton, but I gained a little bit when I was in Florida, of all places, over the wintertime, and now getting back on it. But it you really have to make your entire self better. It makes it so every part of your life, your business, your personal life, all works well. And you really need, you can't put all in to any one part of your life and be happy. At least I don't think so. And so I appreciate that you follow me on Instagram. You're right. Instagram is my fun platform to say, hey, here's what's going on. I'm raising money for this. I'm helping people with this. I had this great experience that's very visual, so I put it on Instagram. My wife's tired of all my social media connections, on Facebook as well. But the reality is, it opens up your world and says, you know what, I'm leading kind of a normal life, and I'm proud of the fact that at a very old age, I will say it's all in the mind, but at an old literal age, that I'm building a podcast. It's the thing I like to talk about first now, because people just go like, wait, you have a podcast? And then I talk about the digital amplification and things we do, that I'm a content creator. And all of a sudden their eyes go, I cannot believe this. I have people much younger than me that have already retired. I think this is what keeps me sane. And it's interesting because if you enjoy it, it's not a pain. And you can do it just as your hobby if you want to. You can go back from having to be in business to being a hobby. And if you can do that and have fun doing it, it's the best of all worlds.
Oh my God. So true. It's combining your passions, your skills, your experiences, your talents, and creating this life, this integrated life that you love. I mean, that's what it's all about. What would you tell your younger self? Because I'm assuming that you've evolved over the years, that you didn't
Yeah.
have maybe all this wisdom when you were 18, 19, 20 years old.
Oh
What would
gosh,
you
no.
tell yourself? A younger
That's
version of you.
that's interesting. I would say number one, that and it's actually something that I really embraced probably at age 40, maybe a little bit before that, and that it's not going to kill you. Now, that mentality ranged from when we bought a house and decided to sell it and move to a completely different part of the country at a time, on the spur of the moment, truly. And I said, or I guess the comment was, what's the worst that can happen? Now, mind you, I will say that there have been multiple times in my life when that answer has come to me. When we did move from Ohio to California, the comment was, "What's the worst that can happen?" We landed on the day we were going to close on our house, and there were fires in the hills. And somebody told me where they were. It didn't even sound familiar, and I realized it was in the community right next to ours. So all of a sudden, I'm going. So we're going to a place that may not be here by the time that the next day comes. And on top of that, we went there in 2006, and I think we bought on the day that the market was the highest in real estate. From that point on, it went down. It was almost, I told people, it's like if you had $1,000 to throw out the window every day we lived in California. That's pretty much what we did. But then we had an offer to come back to Ohio. Came back to Ohio, and it just so happens that if you were asked my wife, my son, or myself, would you do it again knowing exactly the way it was going to play out? We'd all say yes. It was an experience, and it did not kill us. Yes. Did it make things difficult? Yes. Did it make it so we had to resave to buy another house? Yes. Did it change our life? Yes. But none of us would take that away, because there was a lot of parts of that experience that were just outstanding. And I think that if you realize that, what's the worst that can happen, and it's not the end of the world, I think this is especially important for younger people. Younger people at 24, 25 think that they aspire to be this thing that's been built for them by their parents, by themselves, by their friends. And the reality is, in many cases at 24, 25, 23, you don't have a house, you don't have children, you may not be married, you may have a significant other, but the responsibilities are so much less than what they are when you're 40 and 50. So if you're young, try everything. Don't be confined to what you think your parents wanted or what you thought you wanted. I'm amazed at when you go to high school sporting events at the senior year and people say what they're going to be going to school for and what they're going to study and be.
Yeah.
You go, how in the world do you know you want to be a chemical engineer when you've never seen chemical engineering in your life?
Right.
And it means when you're young, test everything. Heck, when you're old, test everything. Don't just dip your toe in the water. Jump in, disrupt yourself, take risks, embrace change. That's the hardest part. I mean, none of us love change. We're going through it every single day, and it wears us out. And that's the one downside right now is that there's so much happening around us. It can get overwhelming. Sometimes that respite, that quiet place, is maybe doing something that you never thought you'd do and trying it, but going all in on it. Maybe, as I said, maybe on a parallel path to the rest of your life. Maybe just letting go of everything, saying, "Hey, I'm going to try this." It's amazing what you can try. I have a friend who's a designer of tennis shoes. He's just an artist, and then he decided to do specialty shoes, customized shoes, making a business out of it. Now, this person has to learn business because the person was an artist and wasn't really a business person. That's an amazing opportunity for people to think outside the norm and just try something.
Oh my gosh, I totally agree. And with many of my clients, they come to me and they're like, "Should I quit my job or should I try something different?" And I always say it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be an
Right.
and. Continue doing what you're doing if that makes you feel safe and secure for the time being, similar to what you did. But you want to explore and try some new things, try it out. It's all information. You might love it, you might hate it. You might be really good at it, you may not be great at it. It's just information. If you see it as experiences, you'll get some answers and you can continue on and expand more. Or you might go, "Well, this wasn't what I thought it would be," and try something different. Why do you think that sometimes we're so afraid to try something different? Like to
We don't
take
want
some things
we
that are
don't want
perceived
to
as risks?
you know we don't want to be considered a failure. We all have this preconceived notion. We don't want to wake up and say, "Oh my gosh, what in the world did I do?" What's going to happen? But you need to put in perspective. You need to put in perspective if you're young, saying, "Oh my gosh, from the age of 21 to 26 is 5 years. 5 years is what, 1/20th of the possibility of your lifespan if you're a 20-year-old right now? That's not that long. That's a smidgen of time. It will pass. And most of us, almost all of us, don't have to risk life, health, and wellness. So the reality is, if you realize that the risk isn't as great as we make it be, and don't let that overwhelm us, we're better off. How many times has somebody left a job and said, "Oh my gosh, I should have done this 5 years ago, 3 years ago,
Right.
10
Yeah,
years ago"? We are our own worst enemy because we're fearful of what may happen. The
that's
reality
right.
is, you can take a pay cut. If you enjoy
Mhm.
doing your work more and you have a pay cut, but you have some more balance, great.
Yeah.
If you want to say, I want to take my post college sabbatical this year, and I'm 30, and I travel the world and go,
Mhm.
and say, and it's interesting because you watch these people that do this, and not all of them come from money. They just find a way to make it happen, saying, "You know what? I'll find my way back. If I have
Right.
to, I'll find my way back. I'll do something in the meantime." We are our own worst enemy. And it's interesting because once you embrace that change, my wife, she was in traditional store retail. She moved to digital retail. She was scared to death. And then she realized that all her talents transformed. She became the enemy of a lot of the store units because now in the digital side, she was a competition. My
Right.
son, 8th grade, came off a baseball field at the end of a travel game in one summer at 8th grade and said, "Dad, Mom, this is my last baseball game." And we were completely stunned. There was no warning, nothing else. We're a baseball family. We said, "Okay, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to do lacrosse." He had not picked up a lacrosse stick. We said, "How's that?" Number one, we asked why, and he said, "Because
Mm.
baseball's boring," which I had very little to combat that. But on the other hand, he said, I'm going to put in all the time that's needed. I'm going to start from my high school team from ninth grade on, and I'm going to start from my college team from the first year on. I'm going to get signed by a college, and I'm going to play every game." And he did that. And now, not everybody can do it, but was he was getting into a complete discomfort zone. But I hope because of his parents and other people he was involved in, he saw no downside to trying something new. He had faith in himself, and he never quit. People would say, "Why are you taking all these clinics? Why?" Because I got to get better. I have my goal in mind. And his goal was to have fun. And it's funny because now he's out of university. He went an extra year because of COVID in the sports, so he was able to go an extra year. And plus, because he was the only child, we allowed him to do so. But he's now going on a golf trip in a week from now with 12 of his old lacrosse teammates. And that brotherhood lived on. And he looks back and goes, "This would not have been quite the same if he stayed in baseball." So,
I love it.
again, you have to realize, and for him, what's the worst that could have happened? You go back to play baseball or not play any sports.
That's right.
It's just you have to put things in perspective. Sometimes we build our own boogeyman.
That's oh my gosh, the mind is so powerful. I always say use it for good because
Yes.
otherwise. So tell me what's next for you. Do you have do you have a traditional bucket list? Do you have a dreams log,
Oh
or is it
gosh, yeah.
just things that you think about? What else, personally, professionally, are you willing to share with the audience today that you want to make sure you do next?
It's going under the bucket of balance. My son is graduating from university. My wife is retired, and there were plans that we had for when those things happened, but they both happened in 2020 and 2021, and so it didn't quite work out that way. So the first thing on my bucket list is to expose them to some of the amazing places that I've gone. First in the bucket list is go back to I've been to Africa and done a safari. They were not with me. It was a business trip, believe it or not. And I want them to be exposed to that. On my personal bucket list as well is I want to go to Greece with my wife. It's a place that I find I've never been to. I find to be amazingly beautiful. So some travel just for vacation. One thing I did in 2019, it was kind of like a bucket list item, is I actually cut back my travel and said, I'm not going to go to any location overseas without a 4-day layover. So instead of doing a day in, a day to rest, a day for speaking, a day out, I did a day in, 3 to 4 days of speaking, but also see the country and then out. That completely transformed my focus on why I was going there, and it made it also so that I changed my fee structure a little bit because I said, if it's the right place, we can make a deal. And sometimes I made a deal to bring my wife as opposed to taking the normal fee. And even without the fee, to have the opportunity to see the world, and it's so vast and so under not understood and misunderstood. And to be able to go to places you go, geez, I never thought I'd be here. And I think I've told you the story that even to be involved with people you never thought you'd be involved with. I remember two instances. One was when I was in North Africa doing a bank event, and we had probably 200 people in the room. 100 people were from south of the Middle East, and so they had the white garb on, and then the other group were from the northern part of Africa, from Nigeria and such. And so imagine the dynamics as I'm looking out the audience, seeing vastly different diametrics and demographics and cultures. And they would stand in line to talk to me after my event. I'm going like, pinch me. I can't believe I'm here. And then a follow-up trip was going, and I was sponsored by a bank in the Middle East, and going and meeting the chairman of the bank and in his office. And he's again in the white. There's probably a word for it, but the white garb and wearing sandals and bare feet. And I'm just going, if anybody could see me now and realize I'm exposed to this, it takes my breath away because it's not something I ever envisioned myself doing. So I think the bucket list is get on the road again, even to the countries that are more typical, more of the Paris and the Londons of the world that are just so amazing in and of themselves, and to see my friends because I'm very fortunate, knock on wood, that I now have friends internationally that any country I go into, I'm going to have at least a couple people that know who I am, even if I don't know them personally, because of my exposure in the marketplace. So it's a little bit more balanced. I don't foresee myself retiring from everything anytime at all. I'm just going to pare back the parts that take a toll and keep going to the ones that are the most fun.
Oh my gosh, that sounds fantastic. And I hope you get to see and do all of those things.
I do too.
So, the name of this podcast is Live the Width of Your Life. And it's based on a Diane Ackerman quote, which says, I don't want to live my life and get to the end of it and realize I just lived the length. I want to have lived the width as well. So, what
Yeah.
does that quote mean to you? How do you live the width of your life?
And it's all cliche to a degree to put as much into a day as you can. I'm in an age now that I have people that are leaving my sphere of friendships that have not been as fortunate as I am to be here today. I have a friend that just left the Cleveland Clinic today after a week's stay with some cancer surgery. And if you keep on realizing, it doesn't matter if you're 10 years old, 20 years old, that your life is not predetermined by you as to how long it's going to be. You need to make the most of every possible second so that you don't go to bed at night going, geez, I didn't move forward at all. I didn't move any direction at all. That doesn't mean you have to make an advancement. They have to get things done. It's not a to-do list. The fact that you may replace a tennis lesson for a podcast interview and make that decision, that doesn't make it bad. But make sure that you never regret not doing something. And that gets back to the very beginning of what we talked about.
Yeah.
If you're stuck in a job that you're not enthusiastic about, you don't have to love your job. But if you don't really like the way it's contributing to your life, if you don't think you're using your best skill sets to give back to the world, change it. Live the breadth of your life, live the width of your life. It's not linear. And again, I can't emphasize it enough to say, really use the term. And sometimes it's if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. Not too sure about that, but I will say that you need to ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen, and be honest with yourself. Yes, skydiving, we know what the worst is that can happen.
Right.
But if it's going deep sea fishing, or it's going snorkeling, or it's going bike riding on the towpath in Cleveland, if it's simply reaching out to a friend you haven't talked to for months, yourself in my case, then don't live with regrets because it's
I love
filled
that.
with opportunities.
Beautifully said. I couldn't have said it better myself. I am so grateful for you. I'm grateful for our
Oh,
friendship.
thank
Thank you so much for all that you do, what you've given back to so many. And thanks for sharing so much wisdom today from your own experiences. I know that people will find it to be very inspiring. How can we best support you? What is the best way that folks can support you? Follow you on your channels? What else would be helpful for you?
Honestly, the more general thing is tell friends about your podcast. Because the reality is, the people that are listening to you today are not my followers. They're not necessarily wired the way I am. I'm going to share it on my platforms.
Yep.
But for those that are actually listening to what you put your life into,
Mm.
share it with 3 or 4 others. That's what people can do. Because somewhere down the line, it all is going to come back. And I can't emphasize it enough that the universe is so large. The little bit you can move it, transform it, make it better, more than ever before today, it's going to make it better. So, the way to get back for me is to make sure that people share what you're sharing because it's pretty important in today's world to live the width of your life, to lead the whole breadth of what's a possibility there, and to realize that now more than ever, you can start today and do something different.
That's right. You can start today, and you don't need to know how it's all going to work out. You can connect the dots looking back, not always going forward. Thank you so much, Jim. I look forward to continuing to follow you, and I will include all of the ways that folks can find you in the show notes. And hope you have the most amazing rest of your day today. Thank you.
Thank you. You as well.